We've warmed up. Welcome back. Now we're going to do a little bit of sprinting, a little bit more awareness education, kind of like we did before lunch, a little bit more anxiety. But the anxiety piece is just to shine a light on the things that keep getting in the way of just being in communication. Some of you might have noticed at lunchtime, the flow about the topic came with a little more ease. Or even if it didn't come with a little more ease, you notice you were more willing to consider talking about it. So that's great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take some time to look at attitudes and values. And we'll come back to some of these other things after. This is the piece that will probably make the most difference for parents, educators, because we're going to get a chance to look at not only our own attitudes and values, but how do we deal with them in relation to our peers? Because we often want young people to be able to stand up for themselves and speak up for what they believe. We're going to get a chance to see what an advanced skill set that is and how much support they need with it, because it sounds like a good idea, but now we're going to try it. So our values are sacred. And before talking about sexuality, it's so important for us to identify our own. We're not going to change anything. We're just going to identify them. So we're going back to the group rules. Anyone can pass. The more you involve yourself, the more you will learn, the more you will experience, and you have the room to pass. Use I messages when you speak, and speak for yourself, not anybody else, because they're not here to speak for themselves. There's no such thing as a dumb question, but I'm going to ask you not to give any personal or private questions or stories. When you come up to talk about a client, that's different, or your own child. No put-downs, speak one at a time. Most important piece, everybody has a right to their own values, beliefs, and opinions. Today is not the day to change another's, but it is the day to embrace one's own. And I'll bring that back when we need to have it. What I'm going to say before I go any further, I told you earlier that I would tell you about how I use ground rules with the students. So the Family Life and Sexual Health Flash Curriculum. It's a resource in the back of your book I'll point to in a bit. Has some excellent lessons. They were designed by Seattle King County Public Health. And they break things down into nice little pieces. It's a curriculum you can get to online. You can just download the lesson you need, and it even has PowerPoint. It has things like not only how to say no, but how to hear no. Because some of our individuals, they can say no all day, but they can't hear it without a meltdown, or they ignore it. So what are the steps to hearing no? Because that's a different step than saying no. So it breaks it down into very small components. That curriculum starts out with looking at how to create a safe space. And sometimes when we say what should the rules be, our individuals who are neurodiverse will say don't do this and don't do that and don't, because that's their world, right? So it's all don'ts. So we have to come up with a way that they will give something other than don'ts. So what it says in Flash that I do is I say to them, when we're in a group and we want to learn, here's what I want you to answer. I like it when. When I'm in a group and I'm learning and I want it to work, I like it when. And then they say things like, well, people raise their hand. So there's no negative. People speak one at a time. We can ask questions. Nobody puts anybody down. Let's have fun. Use adult words. And we write them down. And they are creating it. I'm not giving it to them. And often they're aware because they have classroom rules. So they are already aware of the rules. We're just refreshing them in that way. The reason I use ground rules is so I never have to target an individual. I can look at the whole group and say, if it gets really, everybody's talking, and I say, excuse me, what ground rule is missing right now? And they'll look at it. They'll say, speak one at a time. I say, well, let's put it back in. So then everybody goes back to speaking one at a time. So I never have to say, could you please be quiet? Could you please stop that? I just say, what ground rule is missing? And then they start to self-correct. And sometimes they'll even point to, they'll kind of go, because the other person isn't following the ground rule. And then we get back together. So what's great about that is we can go from chaos to alignment very quickly. And sometimes we haven't put up a ground rule that's needed, and it might be, please put your cell phones away. And somebody might notice that that person's distracting me with their cell phone. So I'll stop and say, should we add that as a ground rule? Would that help? And they'll kind of nod, so we'll add it. So that's what I never work with a group on this topic without establishing those kinds of rules. And with youth, they create it. I'll add teacher ones, like the teacher has the right to not know all the answers. And sometimes I'll add the confidentiality one, because sometimes one of the rules I need to put in is, I'll say to the grade 7s or kids in grade 7 who are dealing with special needs, the children in grade 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 didn't come to school today to learn about body science the way you're learning about it, because you're old enough and it's time to learn. But the kindergarten kids did not come to school today to learn about how to clean their foreskin. And their parents didn't sign a form for us to talk about it at school either. So when you're out on the playground, after school, like that, please keep those conversations amongst your peers, but please make sure they don't leak out to people who are younger, who aren't here today to learn about it. So that's another boundary that we're setting so that the school ground doesn't become a place where the grade 7s are educating everybody. The neurodiverse grade 7s are educating the kindergartners, right? And because some of our individuals are young inside, they get the information in school and they're 14, but they're befriending 8-year-olds. So they need to think, so they can talk to their trusted adults. So they identify the trusted adults in their world. Sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's not. It's a school counselor, it's their occupational therapist, but they need to design who the trusted adults are. The elementary school kids, we just assume it's family, and if it's not, we design who it is. Very important that they know where they can speak, and those 2 or 3 people are key, and otherwise the topic is private. Okay? So what we're going to look at is, what do you believe? What are your family values? Where does your blood pressure go up? Which topics are hard to talk about? Okay? So this activity is an opportunity to physically demonstrate the differences in attitudes and opinions that we have when we work in this field. And how do we relate to that? And so the whole purpose is just to alert ourselves to our own feelings. The other thing I'm going to ask you to look at are feelings change depending on the situation. So if I say something like, well, let's practice. Here's an example. Thumbs up means agree. Thumbs down means disagree. Arms folded means undecided. Okay? Here's the statement. Birth control is the woman's responsibility. Agree, disagree, undecided. Okay? And then I might say, okay, so now it's your 16-year-old who now is neurodiverse, and it looks like they have a boyfriend, and does your thumb change? Is it birth control is a woman's responsibility? So now we've got a 16-year-old who's in a situation where they may end up having sex. Is your thumb still up? Is it now down, or are your arms folded? Different circumstances, different situations are going to alter what we do. We don't need to worry about it. We just need to notice. Once we notice it, we're free of it. We just need to notice. So you're going to be doing a lot of work in the background noticing, but what if this, but what if that? All you want to do is notice, what do I feel in my gut about this versus that versus that? That's important. Okay? So just be aware of that. So, oh yes, we'll get there. You might not have this slide, I don't know. Over here you've got A for agree. Over here you've got B for disagree. There's no in between for this activity. So you can choose A, and if you decide, I wonder what they're talking about over there in B, you have every right to walk over to B and have a conversation over there. What you're going to notice is, how come it's so hard to cross the room? Why can't we be that fluid with different points of view? You're going to notice the feelings. All right, so here's the first statement. And remember, you have the right to pass, but I encourage you to be involved. Here's the first statement. We would probably have fewer sexual hang-ups if we had been allowed to experiment freely as children. If you agree, please walk over to this side of the room, and if you disagree, please walk to that side. Go ahead, and then I'll give you the next direction. So why is that challenging? Because we know that today, or when we go back in time, people used to go through puberty at 15 and they were married by 19. 4 years of abstaining, and a lot of people didn't make that. But now we know there are children 8 years old who their bodies are acting like adult bodies. And when we ask our children today, when do you think you might get married and have kids? If they follow our prompts, I'm going to finish my education, I'm going to go to post-secondary, find a job, get settled, and then maybe I'll think about marriage. That brings us to the average age of 30. So now we've got individuals 10 years old who are already feeling some of the sexual feelings because their body, they have breasts, it's changing, and they're not planning to reproduce till they're 30. So now we don't have 4 years, we have 20. So when we say you need to wait till you're married, we need to think about what we're asking. It's not that it's not possible, but it's not possible without communication. It's not possible with opportunities to talk about the topic. It's not possible without us being approachable and askable enough that they can come home when something goes awry and we can actually be there, move out of reaction and into response, and listen. And sometimes listening isn't condoning. Listening is listening. Don't mix them up. And after we listen, we can come back and say, what did you learn? And when the conversation's almost done, we can say, and the family values are, and the family rules are. And sometimes with my boys, I would say, thank you for sharing. We broke 2 family rules in this experience. So we need to have consequences, because we always have consequences when we break family rules. So we got to come up with some. What do you think? I don't know. Okay, let's try this. If I was the teenager and you were the parent, and that happened, what do you think would be an appropriate consequence? They'll answer. How about if we start with that? And sometimes, no kidding, they are so tired of being in those situations, they'll say, okay, well, maybe I don't have my phone or my iPad for a week. And sometimes they hand it over because they don't want that stress. And they need to use us as excuses. My teacher said this, or my counselor said this, or my mom or dad said this. That's okay. They can make me the big bear. I don't mind. Okay. That was not a neutral face. That's usually the face they get. Sometimes I say we should do these programs with glasses and mirrors all around because it's amazing what our faces will look like. And sometimes when I tell them to go and ask their parent, they go, well, I can't. And we go, why? And they say, well, we'll get in trouble. I said, well, how do you think you'll get in trouble? Because their faces go red and their eyes bug out and they can't speak. I say, well, don't worry. Their eyes will go back in. The color will drain and words can come out of their mouth. It's okay. But that might be the first reaction and you're not in trouble. But most of the time when they see that kind of reaction, it's because they're in trouble. So they equate it to, I'm in trouble. Can't have that conversation. And we don't realize that the way our face is communicating, this is disgusting, I don't want to talk about it, even though we want to talk about it and we don't want them to experience that it's disgusting because it's natural. So it's a challenge.